Oh no, it's nippy out.
It dropped from about 50 to 35 since 8 o'clock this morning. I'm getting little snow showers. Nothing recording.
Yeah. Oh, the big news up here, I guess they're going to start making snow at the one, I guess it's Camelback, I believe.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah, they're going to start making snow. So.
Like it's good for business.
Yeah.
I have to run, Jeff. I'll be back in a couple minutes, but I am recording this now.
Okay, awesome. Wait here a little bit for, so we have a couple more people come and join us. So, well, thank you, Tina, for offering to do this. That's great. Really.
I offer.
I see how that works.
It's okay. I have to attribute a lot of it to my folks down in DC, like Sasha and Noelle in absentia. Yeah.
Yeah. Noelle, we were hoping to have Noelle. Unfortunately, she's off on maternity leave right now, or soon leaving. So.
Oh, she already had the baby.
Did she? Okay.
Yeah, she had a little boy. He's adorable.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, she's awesome. I've worked with her.
Yeah.
Before.
I work with her closely, and Sasha and the whole team there. So I just don't speak as quickly as Noelle does.
My needs.
I tend to tone it down a little so that people can follow me.
Tina spends a good part of every July down in DC at the what's the name of the
AASA.
AASA, federal.
Sure.
And I do the AESA legislative, so I do September and January.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah, my first meeting with Noelle was way back when I testified at an Irate hearing. Actually, on behalf of ESAs at that time when I was working at my ESA, and it was just a, I can't even describe the experience. It's like, you kind of go in there and there's a CEO from AT&T and a CEO from Cisco, and here I am, just some everyday guy in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, and it's like, they firing questions at me, and the one I'll never forget, they asked me, and I just sometimes I just respond off the cuff sometimes, which can be good or bad. And they said, well, how long do schools keep equipment? I said, basically till you turn it on and it doesn't work.
This is true.
So, but well, it is 3 o'clock. I guess we're going to go. If you guys are okay, I'm ready to get started. I think the group is. I'll watch the chat area there if anyone has any questions and so forth with that.
Is there anyone else on?
How many are on?
Right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 6 so far.
Okay.
In addition to the panelists?
Yes.
Okay, because we just see the 3 of us here.
Right. Yeah. We're in webinar.
Okay.
Mode, so they can view us. If you have anyone that has questions, they can just text us, and then I can forward the questions to you and so forth on that. So, and we are recording it too, so it will go out to the NAMTC website then.
And are you sharing the PowerPoint?
I can give you. I think I can give you access to do that, or you should be able to actually share the PowerPoint from your screen if you share the screen. But I can share the shit. I guess I can.
Or I can speak without it. Whatever you want.
No, that's okay. And I'll send. I can. I'll bring the PowerPoint up. I can do that.
Okay.
So,
I don't know if you want to put it in the chat too, so other people can get it.
Sure, that's a great.
After this is over.
Okay. Be happy to do that. So I'd like to welcome everybody. This is our NAMTC Share Conversation November. My name's Jeff Craven. I think everyone probably knows me. I'm the executive director of NAMTC, and really excited to get together with these conversations. It never ceases to amaze me how much there is to learn, and how much resources and knowledge collectively that we have as a group. So I really appreciate you taking time to do that. And with that, I'd like to also introduce you to Dr. Brad Landis, who's our president of NAMTC, and I'll let him introduce Tina.
Your official title is Director.
Community and Government.
Welcome, everyone, and I'm pleased to introduce one of our prize employees here in Montgomery County, loved by our superintendents and our board members for her work in the legislative arena, both at the Pennsylvania level and at the national level. And so when Jeff was looking to find someone to speak to federal issues, Tina came to mind, and I'm pleased that she is able to join us. So I'd like to introduce Tina Valletta, Director of Community and Government Relations here at Montgomery County Intermediate Unit in Norristown, Pennsylvania. And she will update us on what's hot. That particularly, she tailored this to the audience.
Somewhat.
Somewhat. So issues at service agencies and the type of work that we do that could be affected by federal legislation. So Tina.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I have to attribute much of the input on a daily federal level to Noelle Ellersoning and her team, Sasha Pudleski. If you haven't already joined their emails on the leading policy blog, she is a wealth of information. As I said earlier to Jeff, I do not speak as quickly as Noelle, so hopefully you can all understand me. So on the first slide, are you doing it, or is Jeff?
Go ahead, click, Jeff, or did you give me control?
So I just wanted to do a little recap of where we are from the past fiscal year appropriations. Although they initially, the administration wanted less money for education and to propose vouchers. That's a big topic of conversation, both in the federal level and as well as at our state level. Vouchers are a big topic. But there were some increases in education, which was a good thing. If everyone recalls what happened with the shutdown last year, had it not been for the fact that fiscal year 2019 appropriations, that package goes along with Health and Human Services. The package was approved before all the other appropriations bills, so that when the shutdown occurred, it did not impact education and Health and Human Services, which would have the largest outcry when a federal shutdown occurs. So because they had already passed the appropriations bills for education, we didn't see the hurt immediately. Next slide.
Next slide.
Unfortunately, I wish I could say the same were the case this year. The fiscal year 2020 budget appropriation bill has not been approved yet. Although the House did pass a bill with an increase $4 billion to education, as of today, we still do not have a package that supports defense, labor, HHS, and education. So that is still in limbo. President Trump, in his fiscal year 20 budget, again, talk about cuts to education, but there was a lot of focus on increased defense, particularly in the area of the border wall. That's where the breakdown has come down in any appropriations discussions because of the Senate Democrats opposing any efforts to moving defense spending toward the border wall. So, and education unfortunately gets thrown into any argument that's coming on. Because we did not get an appropriations bill passed and the package of bills passed, there was a continuing resolution approved in September that takes us until November 21st, which is just looming ahead of us very shortly. And so they are now in discussion on a continuing resolution that will take us beyond November 21st, or we will look at a shutdown. Doubtful that that will occur. However, they will need to talk about that to make any improvements in the fiscal year budget negotiations from moving forward. So that is still very much in limbo. I am hearing that it may take till spring, late spring, before we will see the budget appropriations bill passed. But you never know because, of course, we're entering into a presidential election year, which always does throw everything into a questionable, is it going to pass? Are there going to be positions taken that will end up stymieing any discussions? And again, we have other issues that are right now at the forefront of discussion in the legislature. So we don't know whether they even have time to discuss the nitty-gritty details of legislation. Next slide. Yeah, at the Department of Education level, there were things that were done that we saw: Federal Commission on School Safety recommendations, school discipline guidance, supplement, not supplant guidance, proposed guidance, equitable services, ESSA report on Title I equity. We're still waiting on the fiscal transparency guidance. As you may know from ESSA, there was a requirement that the school entities put out a report. School districts would have to report building by building expenditures, and that is a requirement under ESSA. And we were waiting for some guidance on that, as well as further clarification on the regulations for Title IX. I know there's been much discussion about sexual assault reporting at the higher ed level and how that works with Title IX. Next slide. Public charge regulations. So the public charge changes were supposed to take effect October 15th. There are now, there's now a nationwide injunction due to several court orders in various states. So until there's a final resolution of cases of this issue, then we are on pause. What does that mean, and why does it impact education? Well, public charge is a term used by U.S. immigration to refer to a person who's considered to be dependent on the government for subsistence. Who does this impact? This impacts families who have a family member who's here legally on a visa, but they're trying to get more permanent status, and there is a look to see whether or not there's an over-reliance on public assistance. So that could have an impact on families in the education realm when you're looking at nutrition, signing up for SNAP, and any other type of programs. Mind you, Head Start does not fall within the public charge look back. So there are things though, SSI, SNAP, Section 8 housing, public housing, Medicaid. So there will be families who will not seek those services, or will refuse Medicaid services, for example, for their child in school, because they're in fear that it will look like during this 12-month period that they're looking at, whether or not in the aggregate that they have had too many public charges or reliance on assistance from the federal government. So this could truly affect our students in the schools as to whether or not they're eligible for benefits that otherwise would have been open to them. And that's because there is a true fear on the part of the families to participate in these. But we will see what happens. Again, it was supposed to take effect. It is right now on hold and until final determination by the courts. Next slide. This is a biggie, I'm sure, in your communications, the battle over E-rate. I'll tell you that one of the things that I could always count on going down to DC when I first started with the IU was that FCC, E-rate, they were safe zones. Those were things I didn't have to worry about in talking about cuts. We saw an increase and desire on the part of the FCC to make connectivity, a priority across the nation, and we saw money being put toward that. And I was always told that, don't worry, E-rate's safe. It falls under FCC. It's not subject to the appropriations, issue that comes up each year. That's not the case anymore. Now we have a chairman who has chairman of the FCC who wants to place limits on the amount of money the E-rate program could make available. And as such, that poses an issue for us. And the FCC's proposal would be to set a cap for overall USF. And that cap, again, would impact our schools, particularly those schools that are really in the rural areas of the country. E-rate is of such importance to ensure that there is connection. And the unfortunate part was that in the proposed rulemaking by the FCC, there is a move to basically lump E-rate with rural health care under a single cap. If that should happen, then you're having a competition between education and rural health care. And as you can imagine, when you're dealing with healthcare, that probably would take priority in spending over E-rate dollars for schools. So we are very concerned about E-rate, and we continue to say, talk to your legislators about the importance of E-rate, how much it really does support our schools, and how urgent it is that continued funding remains separate and apart from healthcare. Next slide. The other big thing that we have is our nation's schools are, of course, depending on where they are, have varying needs of support on infrastructure needs. And we are looking at Rebuild America's Schools Act, and that would fund $70 billion in grants and $30 billion in bonds to help with physical and digital infrastructure needs in schools. The problem with that, of course, is they're asking for more money. This is supported by the House Democrats, and unfortunately, it is highly unlikely that we'll see that go across the finish line with approval in the Senate. And so once again, we're left with infrastructure problems that won't get any better. There's certain tax realities that could make it easier for private business to support public infrastructure measures, and that would be rehabilitative or repair, not new construction. That's under the Qualified Zone Academy bonds. If they would indeed be extended, then there is the possibility that you could see private dollars going toward those infrastructure improvements. But until such time, everyone is dependent on whatever they have right now across the country and in our state. It certainly poses an issue with school construction. Next slide. One of the big talking points that I've been hearing repeatedly when I go down to DC is the discussion about school nutrition. Again, I want to refer back to the public charge issue. Keep in mind that SNAP does play a part in the public charge analysis to see whether or not a family has exceeded the number of government assistance programs. So that poses a problem in and of itself for families who want to submit for assistance under the free and reduced school lunch program or breakfast program. The Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act of 2010, in that act, it was supposed to be reauthorized and looked at every 5 years. 2015 came and went. We're now at 2019. We still don't have reauthorization. In July, the USDA did release a notice of proposed rulemaking. The response period was supposed to end early on in the fall, and it was extended to November 1st. So we do have our public comments in, but it does talk about, the rulemaking does talk about revising and limiting the categorical eligibility for SNAP. That could affect 500,000 students across the nation. And so, as you can imagine, that is of great concern to all of us who want to ensure that students do not have food insecurity. So we're hoping that reauthorization would keep us back on that review cycle, modify some of the Smart Snacks in Schools rules, see an increase in support for school breakfast programs, and also to oppose any effort to block school meals programs. And that SNAP discussion continues. Next slide. So what has the work been down in DC primarily this year in the education realm? Last year it was Perkins, so we were told things would not happen unless Perkins gets approved. This year, things like IDEA won't be a focus because we were told the higher ed reauthorization would have to happen first. We thought that Senator Lamar Alexander, who of course was very instrumental in pushing through ESSA, with an announcement that he is retiring, we thought this would be his swan song, and he would really work hard across the aisle with Patty Murray, which he did with ESSA, to get the Higher Education Act reauthorized. Unfortunately, there were initial attempts to do that in a bipartisan negotiation. There was a breakdown of discussion with regard to that, and some of the outstanding issues include Title II, teacher prep, Title IV, and Title IX. As such, Senator Alexander introduced the Student Aid Improvement Act that was focused on the FAFSA, transparency of college costs, extension of Pell, and funding for minority serving institutions. However, Patty Murray said that's not enough. We need to do a full reauthorization. We shouldn't just look at a piecemeal approach. So where does that leave us? With two very different acts. At the end of October, the House Education Committee did mark up and vote along party lines a comprehensive reauthorization, HR 4674, that Patty Murray was pushing forth. That's the College Affordability Act. The GOP is completely opposed to it. So I'm not even sure if it will come to a House floor vote by the end of this year, and all indications are that it isn't unlikely that we will see it at the Senate side too. And so that, again, another reauthorization that is on hold. And until everyone can work together, we will not probably see reauthorization anytime soon, which poses a problem because, as I said, we're being told that any other education-related matters that would be taken up will stay at the back burner until the higher ed reauthorization occurs. So I always worry when something gets stymied that we know is on the list in that calendar of events that the legislature is trying to push through. So we will keep following the higher ed reauthorization to see what happens. Next slide. So as I said, there are a lot of other issues to tackle. When we talk about advocacy, there's still the issues with regard to the fiscal transparency. Perkins, luckily, we have seen more dollars with the 19 budget, but we have to continue advocating for an increase in career tech dollars. I mentioned some of those others. IDEA is on the list. Again, there's been much discussion about the need for reauthorization. I had Senator Casey's policy director here last week, and Brad, you heard him say it. They are not keen on IDEA reauthorization. They are interested in full funding, meaning up to 40% of what was originally intended when IDEA was passed. But there is reluctance on the Senate Democrats side to push for reauthorization. I think there's a great fear in this current political tone to reopen something for fear that there would be more cuts as opposed to benefits in any type of program like that. Rural education still is, there are items that definitely need to be reviewed on a continual basis. There are, again, attempts to cut dollars from rural ed in an area where they should not. School vouchers will continue to see that push for public dollars going to private interests. That's been a mantra of the Secretary of Education as well as the President's administration. So I would suspect that we'll continue to see a conversation along those lines and a push to have dollars go to private education. E-rate, of course, Lifeline, EBS, the emergency broadcast issues definitely need to stay at the forefront for advocacy. School safety has become a hot topic. The U.S. Secret Service just released its report, and there's no surprise in an analysis of the school shooters that a lot of issues that have occurred with shootings in schools or harm in schools has to do with the mental health of students. So one of our pushes always is to bring legislators into the idea that school safety is beyond just hardware, that we have to look at mental health supports. Student data and privacy, not discussed in terms of a lot of legislation coming forward, much discussion right now though with regard to what happens in cybersecurity, with the issues that are happening with cybersecurity breaches. This discussion becomes all the more important. Also, there's always that review of FERPA to see whether or not data can be released. Medicaid chip, for the moment, we hold our breath because we never know when they're going to be new indications of talks of cuts. But for now, that's not on the front burner, so we're taking a sigh of relief on that fight. Again, Higher Ed Act, early ed, affordable care, all of these have touch on education issues that are of import to us. Today marked a very important day in the Supreme Court with regard to DACA and immigration issues. This again has impact on our schools as to the status of children who are here illegally and what happens to them. There are quite a number of students that are in the lurch as to whether they're staying or going. Meanwhile, our schools must educate the students. But today, the Supreme Court has been hearing the oral arguments on the DACA challenge. So the administration has tried to pull away supports that were proposed under the Obama administration. And we will see what the Supreme Court says after the arguments. That decision is not expected to be issued until the spring when they resume again. And there's always the discussion of taxes whenever we talk about advocacy. Next slide. So if you have any questions or need any further clarification on anything, please don't hesitate to contact me. And I hope you'll continue to advocate at the federal level, not just the state level, because there is a lot that needs to be done and a reluctance on the part of the legislature to move forward on those issues. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Tina. And Jeff, are there any questions coming through the chat for right now?
Yeah, I see that.
Oh, there we go. All right.
Are we good?
I think, yep, everyone's, thank you, very informative. Appreciate the information.
Thank you.
That sounds like a lot of stuff.
A lot of moving parts, but again, with an election year coming up, we'll see how much it moves.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, thanks, Tina. Okay.
Thank you, Tina.
A lot of thank yous.
Just a real quick reminder, if there's still time to register. Our leadership summit is in 2 weeks, I believe. The week after Thanksgiving. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Have some great speakers. Dr. John Landis from Apple and Gabrielle Hewitt from the New School Rules, and we hope you'll participate in our year-long book study as well. So